Hello, everybody. I hope everybody has had a great week. Um, we are still currently working on our literary analysis rough draft. I have extended the date on that. I announced that in class the other day, but please just look at the assignment where it needs to be turned in and it'll show you the correct date for turning that in. I figure we have a little bit more time to work on this, and I really want us to get those rough drafts looking as best as they can. That way, whenever you're turning in your final product, you don't have too much to really do. Um, for this, I wanted to spend some time kind of showing you what I'm looking for when it comes to this literary analysis. There are other videos where I introduced the project and talked a little bit about research, but I thought it'd be helpful for you guys to actually see what it looks like kind of in real time. Now, if you've already found your secondary source for your paper and it is a something that is analyzing the literature, you already have some examples that you can look at. However, I know that some of y'all's research has to do with maybe socio-political issues that are relevant to the text, or different types of sources that are informing your analysis of the text. So that's perfectly fine. But for those of you who have used a literary journal article, that's a good example for you to look at as well. This is just an old paper of mine. It's not perfect. I think I've told you all my writing process before. I like to write almost everything on Google Drive so that I have it saved and got some backups going on. But when I actually edit it, I download it to Microsoft Word just because I find Word's editing functions to be easier for me to work with, especially when it comes to kind of fixing up my works cited page. So we have seen examples of this before, but just to kind of reiterate, this is what, if you're doing MLA, this is what the first page of your paper should look like. This page number and your last name goes in the header, but nothing else. So I have seen papers that students have turned in this semester where this information right here, like your name, my name, the class, etc., where that has popped up on every page, that's because you're putting it in the header. It does not belong in the header. I'll show you guys where the header is. It does not go up here. I keep pointing with my finger even though you guys can't see that. So just pay attention instead to the cursor. It does not go up here. It goes right here on the actual page. Do not don't do a bunch of spaces or bold or underline or anything for your title. Just a regular title. Now, if you're using a larger text that does need to be like italicized, that of course will be done, but your title should just look normal unless you're having to show that something, for example, I have a quote in my title, so that's in quotation marks, and I have two short stories in my title. So those are in quotation marks as well, just to indicate that those are small works. I start off, and I'm not going to read all this out loud to you guys. That would take way too long. This is quite a long paper. I wrote this for one of my PhD courses, so I'm not asking you guys to be as involved as this paper is, but I figured seeing some analysis might help you guys. This is a paper I wrote about Katherine Mansfield. She's considered a British author. She's actually from New Zealand, but also spent some time in Britain. And I'm talking about a couple of her short stories and also grief, right? So, because I know the time period in which Katherine Mansfield is writing, a lot of the people who write at the same time as her are writing in kind of this reflection of World War I, also known as the Great War. And so I had the idea to connect some of the elements of her writing to grief and to the collective grief, and also some different mental not issues, but maybe some cognitive issues that are a result of grief that I see present both within her text and also something that I found in some other research. Um, that all being said, I have highlighted my thesis here, And my thesis is a little wordy. This is, again, y'all don't necessarily have to do all this. This is just kind of what I came up with. Through the use of modern literary techniques, Catherine Mansfield's short stories are indicative of traumatic effects on the brain after experiencing a close death. Through ambiguity, silence, and denial, the stories represent the cognitive distortions experienced by mourners, particularly those with prolonged grief disorder. So, obviously, this thesis is not something that I came up with before researching. Writing is not always linear. I had this idea about grief, and I also noticed something about modern literature is it's very fragmented. And so that is something that I related to as a person. It kind of touched me personally as I was going through kind of my own grieving process at the time. Um, and so I just started researching it and found something that connected to it. And you might not find something like this. You might just talk about something that's clearly present in the text. So, for example, in everyday use, you might notice there is tension between generations or tension between socioeconomic statuses of people within families. And you might want to talk about that. That's something, and then you can do a little research on that and show within the text, show from the primary text places where your analysis fits. So I do this in a few different ways. Because this is a longer paper and I had to have a lot of resources. I do kind of an introduction talking about kind of the psychology and the history behind what is going on. And I use other experts in the field to show that my reading of the text is legitimate. So, for instance, I have Kate Kennedy here, who talks about women writers and loss during World War I. So I have quoted her here to kind of prove that my association of grief within the text is a legitimate one, right? But I also have to add my own stuff. So I have this little literature review here, but at some point I have to actually address the text, right? So one of the things that you have to do is take direct quotes from the fictional work that you are covering, and then you analyze them. I'm trying to go through and find here. As you can see, I've quoted from my outside sources quite a lot, but for every quote I have quite a bit of explanation to go along with it. My paper is not taken over by quotes. Now that I have kind of talked about the experts, I go into my own analysis. So I go into the short stories, and I am quoting from The Late Colonel's Daughters in a specific instance. And this informs kind of my analysis on it. As you can see, I also leave notes to myself when I work on stuff, work on this hot mess sentence. So you can see it's not perfect. And the writing process is not perfect, but I've gone through and I've picked different quotes and incorporated them into it. These do not stand alone. I talk about introducing a concept within the story. So then I give the quote that proves that. And then after that, I have a full almost paragraph explaining that quote. So it's just a little bit of the text and a lot of my own interpretation of the text. Here I have what's called a block quote. We should not see any block quotes in your papers just because this is such a short paper. A block quote just takes up too much room. And honestly, students sometimes like to use block quotes because they think, oh, this is going to take up a bunch of my paper. And so I don't have to write as much. But formatting block quotes and then having to explain the quote to me just takes so much time. So I only use a block quote if completely necessary. Um, I have a term here, prolonged grief disorder, that I talk about. So I explain it when I first talk about it, and then I abbreviate it the rest of the paper. Let us move along. Forgot how long this paper was. If you guys are going into graduate school, you're going to be doing quite a bit of writing. Just warn you guys. Or into a PhD program, even more writing. Um, let's see. Got my conclusion here, and you guys don't have to have these little headers. I just find these useful with longer papers, just to kind of keep my thoughts organized. But if you want to use little section headers, you are welcome to do so if that helps you organize your thoughts. Now we come to the end of my paper. As you can see, I have not done the hanging indent on all of these. Like I said, I like to download it first and then do the hanging indent. But I have all my sources here. They're in alphabetical order. And not only do I have my outside sources, but I also have my primary source here, which is Katherine Mansfield. So I have Katherine Mansfield here, who is, again, that's my primary text. That's the fictional text I'm working with. And that is something that I use for the paper. I'm sorry if y'all hear children screaming in the background. But I thought this would be a nice example for you guys to look at. It's a very long paper. I'm probably not going to upload the whole thing for you guys to read, just because you probably won't be that interested. But also, sorry guys, I am back. But I figured this would be nice for you guys to look at, just to kind of see what I'm talking about, because the instruction sheet, of course, kind of tells you how to approach the paper, but I figured it'd be helpful for me to kind of take you through what one actually looks like and how I've incorporated those quotations, what the citations look like, and just how it all comes together. For your activity for today, I have just uploaded a little check-in. So all you have to do is go in there and answer the questions I have for you. It's just asking kind of where you're at. Do you have a topic? Do you know what you're working with? Do you have an outside source? Do you know how to cite your primary source? All those fun things, so that I can kind of look back through those before we meet next week and see where we can fill in some gaps. As usual, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to shoot me an email, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week.